to introduce Iylia Husni. She is, let me grab her bio here quickly, a patient advocate, a startup builder, and a social activist from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. She studied international business in London and began in fashion and then also a tech startup, which focused on research and bridging artificial intelligence technologies from Europe to Southeast Asian nations. Beyond business, she has a passion for making an impact on human lives, and this has really helped her to transition to a social enterprise called Accelerate Global, which she is the Chief Operating Officer for. And this is dedicated to addressing youth unemployment and underemployment across 6 countries. She's also trying to expand this in a national scale by being part of a founding team and the youngest female in the team of the first youth-led political party in Malaysia, which is called MUDA. She, in 2021, became a patient having her first surgery in which she experienced considerable blood loss. And this experience has really brought her to patient blood management and bloodless medicine, and really bringing awareness of how, as a patient, you may feel quite underinformed in making your medical choices. And after she has investigated this, she's been speaking about this issue and stigmas that surround iron or bloodless care from a patient perspective. And she'd like to raise awareness and combat stigmas surrounding these treatments that may be new or different in patients' care. And so we're very happy to have Iylia this first day of our conference, and happy to hear her talk.
Hi, thank you so much for the introduction. 1 second, with my internet, it's suddenly acting up tonight. I'll be sharing a little bit of a presentation, although it might not be as detailed as some of the speakers earlier today. So if you would just give me 1 moment. I'm trying my best to see if it's starting. 1 second, yeah.
Oh, no problem. I was just going to remind everyone that slides are available at request. If you want to, please email info@bmssociety.org. You can help provide any info or background or contact with our speakers and obtaining any slides from this meeting.
Okay. All right. Well, actually, my slides are completely just like one-liners. So if it's possible, I think I'll just kickstart it, as it'll be very, very brief and mainly focus on essentially sharing my experience as a patient. So I think thank you very, very much for a very colorful introduction just now. It seems like I have accomplished a lot, but it's really not all that. So essentially, just to kickstart things, once again, my name is Iylia. There's not that many initials after that name, as I did choose business school over medical school instead. So, which might bring the question as to why a possible capitalist is in a medical conference. So we shall get to that point in a moment. So I will give a little bit of background to myself and explain things further, and also the condition that I had, which had led to essentially an iron infusion earlier in 2021. So my life is mainly focused, I would say, in rather the business and activism and politics arena, not much so in the medical arena. So this is very much not my forte. However, I seem to find myself in medical situations very, very often. So previously, as also mentioned in my brief, I had studied in London, so I had received patient care there too. And also with like activism, that also means I was very, very active, and some of that active career tendencies had affected my condition even further, which led to me having to sort of like, kind of stop myself and realize that I really needed to have a surgery to sort of like fix the situation. I was dealing with Shepherd's crook deformity, so I had fibrous dysplasia. I was also dealing with bone pain and so on and so forth. So I did have corrective surgery, which is essentially a corrective osteotomy. And this was in, again, 2021. That was my very, very first surgery. Prior to that, I have not had an IV line even inserted into me. So the very, very humbling experience, I would say, because for the next few days after that, it was very much having IV lines inserted and reinserted about like 10, 20 times at the very least. So that was a very interesting situation to go through. So during surgery, essentially what happened was that I faced quite a substantial amount of blood loss. So at this point, it was kind of having your HB halved. And I am a very, very petite girl. I'm not sure if that translates as much on camera, but very, very petite, 160 centimeters, like 40 kg at most. So losing that much blood in such a short amount of time took quite a bit of a toll on me. And essentially post-op, it was very, very prominent that it was affecting my condition even further and further. So I was presented with essentially not really an option, I would say. It was more so an ultimatum of saying, this is what has happened. Therefore, what we're doing in the next few hours or so is we're going to be preparing a blood transfusion for you. And I think, I'm sure many here know already the whole process of you being a patient is that you already sign all these forms prior to your surgery anyways, which is agreeing to blood transfusions, agreeing to this, agreeing to that, and so on and so forth. But there's the side effects or even the options that's available aren't really kind of like entertained, or, that knowledge transfer isn't really there when you are a patient, especially more so when you are doing it for the first time. So my experience, to simplify it, was very much so, here are some papers that you have to sign. If not, we can't have surgery. So I signed it. And post-op was essentially, you have lost a lot of blood, and thus we now need to do a blood transfusion. In the simplest form, that was the interaction that happened. So
Hi, Iylia. I'm going to interrupt you just real quickly, a little cliffhanger in your story. I just want to let you know that your slides are visible. So if you want to advance or go back to the beginning.
Oh, are they?
You can see them. Yes.
Okay. Wait, let me. Does it work if I
yes.
do?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It is
Okay,
working.
all right. We'll skip this part, I think. Like go next to the next part. So this is where I'm at right now.
Perfect. Thank you.
So essentially, yeah. So like I was going back to essentially what had happened. The post-op, I had lost essentially quite a lot of blood because of this. As you can see, very, very visual little insert there. So at that time, I was not really presented much with an option. It was very much so a blood transfusion is required, and at that point, kind of, it was very fast. Now, the patient, the last thing you would want to do is care too much about the nitty-gritty. However, as a patient of, well, not really as a patient, just as me in general, I enjoyed the nitty-gritty. So once that was presented to me, I really wanted to know if that was really the only choice that was available. If that was really kind of like, the safest route, if that was really the route that, is recommended to me in all forms, or if it was simply just a simpler option. So for me personally, I had the privilege of knowing a few people who are wonderful, wonderful people who have managed to kind of share this knowledge that actually, blood transfusions aren't the only thing you do, because the common logic, and I would say this is kind of the common logic generally, especially so if you are outside the medical field, is that if you lose blood, you add blood. Kind of a simple equation, but it's never really brought to the table that, if you lose blood, you can actually just simply, kind of push your body more to create blood in the form of, let's say, just simply iron infusions. And that can actually be safer, and that can actually be a route that is more steadily for yourself. So once this option was presented to me, I wanted to try that. I wanted to try that route even further. If that was safer, if it wasn't going to be better for me, then I believe that, that should have been an option that was presented to me in the first place. But so what ended up happening was that they kind of scrapped the whole blood transfusion idea, and they went on to preparing for an iron infusion. And that was also another experience on its own, in my opinion, because I realized that as much as I was confused, or as much as I seemed to be under, the light of like not really understanding the whole concept of iron infusions too much, just still knowing the basics, I realized that there are also a significant number of healthcare professionals who are in the same boat as I was. So, and this had led to a lot of arguments, a lot of gossiping gone wrong, a lot of kind of questions from nurses going, if you had taken a transfusion, you would have been healed like 5 days earlier, or you would have been healed 3 days earlier. So I was in a hospital for 10 days, which I think is too long for anyone. And this was the end of year too, so it was even worse because of that, since I wanted to watch fireworks for New Year's and so on and so forth, for like Christmas and all of that. But that didn't happen because of the blood loss, essentially. So while they were preparing the iron, due to the misinformation that was available, I kept getting conflicting informations from various parties. So from my doctors, I was hearing different things. From the nurses that were taking care of me, I was hearing different things. From, the housemen who were also taking care of me, I was hearing a whole nother different thing. So it was very hard as a patient to identify and actually realize which information is correct and which information is applicable to my situation. So in preparing my iron infusion, what had happened was they generally wasted quite a little bit of processes, time, and also just resources, because the first time that they tried to do an iron infusion on me, it was essentially kind of a failed attempt because I had a slight fever that was going in and out. And I think it wasn't too, I would say, significantly concerning to me, as I was still eating properly. I was still, rather quite hydrated properly. I didn't have loss of appetite or anything like that. But because I had a slight fever, they flagged it as I'm not fit to have the iron infusion at that moment. So even though it was already prepared for, everything was essentially set in stone, IV line was ready, just got flushed and everything. But they wasted a whole bag of iron, and it would have been a successful iron infusion simply because I had a slight fever raise. And I think that really highlights that, misinformation can not only reduce the confidence of patients, but it can also lead to even resources being wasted even further in a situation like this. And this is only as a one-time instances that was actually recorded. So if you scale this to the amount of times where iron infusion attempts are being made, even a slight percentage of failure in this degree, where it's something as simple as an increase in fever to still waste the whole bag, it's still something that is simply, it doesn't justify the cause. So that was my personal opinion of it. So after that, they did do a successful transfusion later, not transfusion, sorry, iron kind of like infusion and so on and so forth. And I ended up improving quite, I wouldn't say extremely fast in the first few days, but I definitely felt a lot better. I would imagine a lot more better than if I had a transfusion. So once I was actually discharged, after having my last infusion, my HB at that time doubled. So now it stands at 15, which I would say is pretty good. But at the same time, it's the fact that to get to that point, there were so much hurdles. There were so many hurdles with healthcare professionals. There were so many hurdles with, understanding the stigmas. There were so many limited information that was being made available, simply because it wasn't even presented at the very start. Just to backtrack a little bit, at the very start, it wasn't even presented as an option, unless prompted, unless I had pre-existing information or so on and so forth. But how many times, does it happen where patients have this information beforehand? How many times does it happen where patients are aware or even feel secure enough to be like, hi, is this an option, or is this something that I can do? If they are not being told it from the start, if they are not even given it's kind of more of an ultimatum that transfusion is the way to go, and this is the way that we're going to do it, and that's final. So I think it brings forth like the importance of, you know, the topic of everything, which is bringing compassion and human touch to the cat. At the end of the day, the medical industry exists for patients, and I think at the core of that, it is very important that at the end of the day, if you are handling any patient care in general, that options are constantly provided for, and knowledge is actually more unified and delivered. And I think having fractions when you're having delivery of medical information is something that truly reduces a patient's confidence in already a stressful situation. I think that's something very important to kind of be aware of, because I know for a fact from personal experiences and from engaging with a lot of groups, and also even from my NGO experiences, whereas if you are sick, options are not something that you have many of. And when it's being restricted even further in instances where misinformation are being laid out, or instances where healthcare professionals are not informed accordingly to deliver this information, it kind of brings down that confidence even further and further and further. When I'm sure many here already know, when there are so many benefits to iron infusions, from not just, you know, a direct patient care standpoint, from economic standpoint, from a social standpoint, and so on and so forth. So I think that is something that really needs to be highlighted from both ends, from the end of a healthcare industry and also from the end of a patient. And I think that is one experience I would like to share from my end. So hopefully it wasn't too laggy.